Hi, this is Dan Gilvazan, and you're listening to the GeekCast Radio Network.
Jazz here, and I am so digging the GeekCast Radio Network.
Cliff Jumper, commence countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, ToyCast. Oh, yes. Listen in to the only toy podcast you will ever need.
Hello and welcome to an all-new generation of ToyCast as we get the origins of any and all toy fans that we can. I am, of course, TFG1 Mike, and this is a new direction for ToyCast. We're going to be doing a multitude of things. This is episode 102. And you heard the big 5-hour recording with episode 100, and then myself, along with Ada Asperin, and my current guest, Josh the FloorBurger. Hello, sir.
Hello, I'm the FloorBurger, and I'm one of those things in a new direction.
Yes, and he's a table elitist.
I am a table elitist. I find tables to be elitist. I would guess that is self-explanatory.
I don't find tables to be elitist because I'd rather eat a burger off a table than off a floor.
Well, look at you.
Uh-huh. I mean, at least I didn't have to worry about a giant bathtub full of unneeded and unused Waterworld toys. Anyway.
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was talking to someone who was so bougie.
Anyway.
Has to have a table, but no Waterworld toys. Oh!
That's right, absolutely. And this is a new direction, a multitude of the new direction that ToyCast is going to be going in. You're going to hear Display Case, which is what we used to do, where it's myself, Josh, and Das, and sometimes it might be myself and other people. I don't know, because that's kind of what I did back in the day, was I got a bunch of people together to talk about one or two toys that they had, like, right within arm's length of them. But this is Origins. And what is Origins? Origins is something I created over on the Pull Bag. I brought it to All Things Transformers. Over there, it's 25 questions about how people got into or out of reading comic books. On All Things Transformers, that should be self-explanatory. It's 25 questions or so, depending on the guest, about how they got into or out of the Transformers fandom, whether they like it, whether they don't, that kind of thing. Well, we're bringing that format to ToyCast, and this might be an extra long episode, folks, because we don't just have 25 questions for this one. We have 41 questions for any and all guests that want to be on ToyCast to talk about their toy collecting habits. Some questions are easy, some questions are hard, and some questions may be a 20-minute answer, other questions may be, I could do without it, and we just move on.
I will be fair with you. I'm not looking forward to the long division portion of this, although the interpretive dance has me very fascinated. So I'm looking forward to that part of the interview.
I'm sorry, the well-dressed man in a suit is not here today. This is a one-on-one thing. That guy that dresses up like the Joker every once in a while, he ain't here. So you can leave your Dasburger love on the floor there, I guess. I don't.
Oh no! The interpretive dance has nothing to do with him, sir. It's a tradition. No. It's a FloorBurger tradition. I've already been doing it. You just can't hear it.
Oh Lord.
Anyways,
if you'd wear your cloggers, we'd be able to hear it.
So I actually switched to Crocs. In my previous house, we had neighbors, and they did not appreciate the clogging at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Nobody appreciates clogging at 3 o'clock in the morning, especially when the toilet's backed up.
That took a different direction than I had anticipated. Let's get to the questions. Let's go. I'm charging you by the minute here.
All right, let's go. All right, 41 questions. We start at the beginning because everybody has to start at the beginning. What is or was the first toy you remember having as a kid, and do you still have it today?
Earliest memory I have is G.I. Joe Charbroil.
Mm-hmm.
I do not have the same one. I did recently pick up a almost complete version at, I believe, one of the local. See, I'm doing already because I'm trying to think. You caught me off guard. No, there's a local toy shop chain franchise. I don't know how well it survived COVID, called Quake, but I did find one that was mostly complete. I think he's just missing his tube. So I do have that particular figure, yes. So G.I. Joe Charbroil.
His tubes?
He just has that big tube. So right now I just have a string on there. I think eventually I'll just go to the hardware store and get a larger gauge wire, and it'll work just the same.
Alrighty then. Just don't tie them together. Was there a particular adult who was supportive of you playing with toys as a kid, and was there anyone who was unsupportive?
So I would say growing up, my mom was always the most supportive, especially as I got a little bit older, into 12 years old, maybe 13 years old. She knew that I wasn't necessarily drawn to the same things that most kids my age would kind of fall into, especially in the 90s, going into baseball and sports. I think she understood that I still enjoyed toys and action figures, and she was always doing her best to help out with that, given our financial situation or whatever. I wouldn't necessarily say that there was anybody who was unsupportive in that they were grabbing my toys and throwing them out the window. I think just having two older brothers and a dad who were all sort of drawn towards baseball and more grown-up, typical male things, it was more, you're a boy, why are you not playing, why are you still playing with toys, why aren't you getting more drawn into what most boys get drawn into at that time? So I don't hold any ill will towards them for that, because now, especially in my career, I'm starting to realize that there are certain trends that people just follow without realizing that it might be negative.
And I mean, honestly, between sports cards and things like that back in the 80s and 90s, we also had Kenner and their starting lineup figures. So, I mean, it wasn't like there weren't sports toys, but yeah, I get what you're saying about the whole, oh, you're 6, you're too old to play with. Trust me, that story's been told to death by me on this show before, so I'm not going to retell that one. But
yeah, it wasn't necessarily 6. It's just when I started getting to be around 12 or 13, I enjoyed baseball. I just wasn't very good at it.
Right.
I went through years where I was decent and went through years where I wasn't very good, usually because I just didn't care. And my brothers and my dad were more in that direction, and being the youngest, my mom and I had our own moments where, I do remember her sneaking me out to the outlet mall and going to the toy liquidator out there. And I still have really good memories of some of that stuff. And she did the best to support me, because it wasn't, I still feel today that she didn't want to tell me that the things I was interested were wrong or bad.
Mm-hmm.
She just wanted to support me in the things that I enjoyed and appreciated. And she just sort of steered me in the direction that made me the happiest. So I'm trying to keep this as much of a consolidated answer as possible.
Right. No, yeah.
Without saying like, so tell me about your father. Let's get into the ego and the id.
Yeah, no. There's no Freud here. I'm just a fraud, so that's okay.
Fair enough.
What types of toys were your favorites to play with as a kid?
I think I kind of described this on one of the previous shows. I recognize now that I was trying to be almost a casting director for whatever narrative it was. So if you look at my vintage display shelves, and maybe one day we'll have a YouTube channel and we can start showing that kind of stuff off. If you look at what would be considered my vintage shelf, it was anything that was maybe popular or cool or something that fit a phase or a fad that I was into. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have random shelves of just Last Action Hero, Demolition Man, Mega Man. If it looked like it could fit into my play pattern, I got it. So I would say if you were to average the height or the style of figure that I've stuck towards, it would be like Kenner Playmates, about 5-inch. So if it was in that range, probably something I went after.
Very cool, very cool. What were your favorite childhood toys that really stood out more than others?
So pretty much anything I got my hands on for Power Rangers as a kid would be up there. Looking at the Megazords, I didn't get a lot of the, I would say there may be 8 to 9 inch tall figures but the 8 to 9 inch figures, those were always standouts for me because there was a point that those were ridiculously hard to find. So anything I got my hands on was amazing. The Bucky O'Hare, one of the few that I had, Toxie, the Toxic Crusader, most of the Ninja Turtles, Pandacon, Yosagi Ujimbo, those were big ones for me. The one food fighter I had, Mean Wiener. I will always like Kevin Costner's, not Waterworld, to lay off, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. That was an amazing figure for me as a kid. And G.I. Joes, just several G.I. Joes will always fall into that category.
Yeah, I figured you were going to bring up Robin Hood because I actually had that one myself. And it's crazy, folks, because Josh and I have only really done 3 episodes together before, and I just realized, oh crap, he's 5 years younger than me. So by the time I get into Power Rangers, I was 13, and it was fine. I wasn't actually into the toy. I wasn't into the toys anymore. But as soon as I saw that movie 2 years later, I was like, I'm going to whatever toy store I have to go to. I'm getting that Ninja Falcon Zord, and there's a picture of me in Florida holding the damn thing with me, just staring at the damn toy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's just, I think that Power Rangers covered a lot of different types of, and I'm going to keep using the term play pattern, and I hope it's something that we can go into, but it covered a lot of play patterns. It had the more posable figures that were not really common at the time. It kind of covered the Transformers combiners aspect. It covered the superhero aspect. And it's during the time of the X-Men and other superhero teams becoming popular. But you also had characters that you could kind of identify with. I'm not going to lie, 4th and 5th grade, there were days I went to school wearing all the same color because I thought that's what you did. I thought that was a fashion style that was acceptable. Quickly learned it was not. But I did go to school I was Tommy. I wore all green a lot.
Go, Green Ranger, go.
That was my choice.
TFG and Mike here, folks. I don't know what happened to my little audio clip here, but what I was saying to Josh was that when I was a teenager in the 90s, I was Tommy Oliver when he was the White Ranger with Saba.
White Ranger, Tiger Power.
Well, in the mid-90s, that was a very easy color palette and style to do. Black vest, white shirt, that was not uncommon. But you show up in 5th grade wearing all green, people are going to have questions. And
Hey, it's better than showing up in kindergarten in corduroys and a horizontally striped shirt.
oh, that's all sorts of confusing, but that's awesome for kindergarten.
No, it really isn't, because that's how you get served eyeball soup at Halloween. Anyway, that's a story for another day, folks.
Indeed it is.
Do you prefer the label of action figures, dolls, toys, or a different label?
So I think all of them fall under the label of toys. There is the toy section. When you get to the toy section, there are dolls. There are action figures. I think that the obvious gender barriers between those aisles still exist even to this day, where some of those barriers companies are trying to break down and just have more of a unisex marketing system. That there are girl action figures, boy action, or they're just action figures. Is there a huge difference between a 12-inch frilly doll that stands on someone's shelf and I'm looking at the Black Series Leia figure? We could probably talk about the differences, but I think it is just totally natural that when you find a label that fits the best, you apply it. So I will say action figures for what I collect. I don't have any dolls that I would actually say is a doll, but do I have people who come over and say, wow, you collect a lot of dolls? And I sort of want to kick them out of my house and file a restraining order against them.
Hey folks, TFG and Mike here, and I goofed up big time in this episode, so all of that has been cut out. Now, on with the show.
No, my mom grew up knowing action figures. She was very, very well aware of them. He-Man, G.I. Joe, Thundercats. She knew all that from having two older brothers of my, like, she had two sons that were older than me. So by the time it got to me, she knew the story. She knew a lot of the stuff.
All right, good guys, bad guys. Which toys were your favorites to play with the most?
So I don't know if they're necessarily my favorite to play with. If you were to actually look at the sampling size of my collection right now, you could probably make the argument that it was very clearly good guys. Mm-hmm. But I think that's also, with the exception of G.I. Joe and maybe He-Man, that's generally what was the most frequently found in the heaviest packed in cases.
Right.
But I usually, part of my, I'm going to say this, and we could probably turn it into a drinking game play pattern, was that my bad guys were very, very powerful whenever I was playing with them. So I only needed one or two. Mm-hmm. And it was, you can make the argument, it was the X-Men or the Power Rangers approach of, you needed the whole team to take down this one bad guy. It wasn't, I was not a bad guy army builder until I became an adult collector.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get into that later.
Uh-oh.
What is or was your favorite toy vehicle and or toy playset?
I can easily say as an adult, the Masters of the Universe Classics Castle Grayskull is just a wonderful piece. I think that will always go down as my preference as an adult of one of the... And I'll bring it up a couple times in this whole questionnaire. It's probably one of my favorite pieces ever created that I've ever had. It fits so many different scales. It's so detailed. It's durable. It's just a very well constructed and well thought out piece. So as an adult, that's what I would say. As a kid, if we're talking about vehicle or play set, so I never got the Ghostbusters Firehouse as a kid. That would have been on my list if I had it. Mm-hmm. As far as vehicle, it would probably be the Ecto 1A. Being one of my favorite vehicles. There were aspects of it that were close to the cartoon, that were close to the movie. It was a functional vehicle. When you had two people in the front seat, could you jam any more in there? No, you could never really get four Ghostbusters in there at once. But let's just say a lot of extra characters got very comfortable with each other in the back trunk of the Ecto 1A, cramming them in there. But
oh Lord, let's move on then.
Hey, you got a team of four and you can only fit two in there. Somebody missed the boat on that one.
Yeah, they probably did, but what are you going to do about it now? So you actually improved on this question, but the reason why I wrote this question down was because different toys have different features. Some are action features, some are other things, but like when you go into a toy store or to a toy show, or if you're looking online, what features define a good toy to you? Basically, how true does the item feel in comparison to the source material likeness?
I'm going to jump right to what I felt as a kid. Mm-hmm. I was always an articulation junkie as a kid. When it came to toys, if you got added articulation, even if it was just knees and elbows, I was a fan of it. So articulation is always going to be important to me. Again, looking at the stuff I have on my shelf, some of the items I have are not nearly as articulated as others. I have everything from G.I. Joe to Marvel Legends to, I think, Centurion's up there, to Visionaries. So there's all different levels of articulation, but that was always important to me. I did not like the pre-posed toys of the 90s. I wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do with a toy. If I wanted him to be a ninja and fly through the air and kick and cartwheel, do whatever, that was important to me. I wanted that to be an important aspect. As far as looking close to the source material, there was an extent that it had to. The original Ninja Turtle line did not look like the show.
No, it didn't.
Kind of looked like the comics, but I didn't know the comics as a kid. And when I saw them, because they were more adult in nature, I was like, ooh, that's dirty. I shouldn't look at that.
Yeah.
But I didn't mind as a kid the different interpretations, because I felt that, okay, the cartoon is a better realization of this toy, and it just worked for me. It was maybe I felt that the artist could do a better job creating these, whatever. I didn't mind so much when it was something like Ninja Turtles, but I'm looking over at my Double Dragon toys, and
said it.
As a kid, I looked at those like, wow, these are absolute junk. They don't look close enough. They have weird features. Doesn't make sense. Now they're on my shelf, but they had to look close enough that at least I could use my imagination to be okay with it. Articulation was big. I also didn't want action features that inhibited the figure, that just took over the figure. So if the action feature was the majority of the figure, I didn't like it. So I can't think of a good example off the top of my head of something, because even now I don't collect anything where the action feature is overwhelming. A good example. Okay, so here's a good example is Last Action Hero, the Mattel toy line. It's imaginative. It's kind of cool, but with the exception of one of the Jack Slater Arnold Schwarzenegger figures, where he's basically like a Kenner Big Five articulation figure, which was my favorite one as a kid. Every single other one, the mold, the sculpt, the action feature dominated the toy, so you couldn't really use it as just a generic uniform figure. He had a throwing feature or had a weird trench coat that popped off or something. And that to me ruined a figure. So I never bought those, never got those. So if it had an action feature, it had to make sense. It had to work for the figure. So I'm looking right now, with the exception of like Double Dragon, like Chuck Norris Karate Commandos. Those action features, for the most part, from my perspective, did not inhibit the figures too bad. Some of them were a little weird, but that was when I remember that, you squeeze the legs, the arms move, but you still can play with them in a normal way.
Yep.
One of the figures has a weird extendable foot or something. It's just kind of strange and never really worked. I'm not sure what the feature was supposed to be, but that's an example of action features that don't ruin a figure. But I preferred your Hasbro Cops, your Kenner styled figures that were not pre-posed, which was a problem with Kenner in the mid-90s. But I've kind of gone off with this. But what defines a good figure? As a kid, that's what I was looking for. As a modern adult, if something's going to be at the 20, or now a lot of the $20 figures are going to be $25 figures, has to be posable, has to be something that can be posed accurate to its source material.
Right.
So if you're giving me a stormtrooper, he's got to be able to aim a rifle. He's got to be able to hold that rifle in two hands. If you're giving me a Han Solo, he's got to hit those iconic Han Solo poses. So there's a lot of figures I've passed up on when I saw that they couldn't do that. If I'm going to be investing money to put something on my shelf, essentially, it's got to be able to replicate the source material as closely as possible.
Right.
Which bothers me when Hasbro is like, oh, we put out a figure that we're going to say for right now, we're never releasing another Boba Fett again. Haha. So you get the first Boba Fett that comes out. Years later, oh, here's a Boba Fett with better articulation, and he's got little fire pieces you can put into his jetpack. I don't know why Hasbro all of a sudden has an accent, but I'm talking as Hasbro with an accent. But that always bothers me. That always actually discourages me from upgrading, because I feel like they know that down the pipeline they're going to be able to do those things. But anyways, I digress. It has to be has to reflect the posability of the source material. Has to be iconic looking, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you want to talk about has to reflect the source material. 1986, 1987 Transformers toy line, Hasbro. The American version of Galvatron was gray, black, and white. The eHobby version that came years later was sort of toy-accurate purple. It wouldn't be until almost pretty much 35... Yeah, this year's 35th anniversary. 35th anniversary of Transformers the Movie's release this August 8th. We are fine. It's actually out in store. I think it's going to be out in stores now soon, but we are getting a leader class Transformers Kingdom Galvatron. Looks just like the friggin' thing from the movie.
Yeah.
So, you want to talk about something that has to look the part? Yeah, I am right there with you. If it doesn't, I don't care.
Well, and that's why when I was younger and Beast Wars was out, I enjoyed Beast Wars. I loved watching Beast Wars when it was out. I was getting a little bit older for toys at that point, but I didn't really start collecting it until I think I got one or two, maybe in high school, as kind of like ironic, like, ooh, Rat Trap, cool. I mean, and the Transmetal Rat Trap is actually a really cool figure.
It is, yeah.
It wasn't until I got into college and like Beast Wars figures were dirt cheap. You could get entire collections for $30. I remember in my dorm getting a box the size of what you would probably get one of those Hello Fresh or those one of those meal programs that sends you all the meals in a box.
Yep.
Just stuffed, filled with so many Beast Wars toys. Got them for $30 off eBay at the time. And there's some really neat ones in that line, but I remember not getting them when the show was out because even though they looked close, some were just kind of weird looking.
Yes, they were.
And that, that's a case of the toys being sometimes designed before the show comes out or whatever, or they're trying to make changes. Yeah. So this was a long answer for a simple question.
No, it's all right. Hey, that's the whole point of having 41 questions. Some are going to be longer than others, and some are going to be shorter than others. Yeah, Beast Wars, nobody knew what Mainframe is going to do as far as I know. And if I'm saying this wrong, Steve Megatron, and you're listening to this, I'm sorry. The original Optimus and Megatron was a bat and something else. And then the show came along and they made them the gorilla and the T-Rex. So, yeah, the original Optimus Primal and Megatron were completely different from what the show actually had.
Yeah. And one of my missions in the last probably, what year is it? 2021. Probably the last 5 or 6 years as a collector is whittling down to the iconic version of the character. So I don't want 15 Optimus Primes. I want one that just screams to me Optimus Prime. Same with Batman, same with Captain America. I used to have 10 Captain Americas. I'm finally whittling it down as much as it breaks my heart because he's one of my favorites. But
well, I mean, just want... Depends on if it's 10 Steve Rogers or 5 Steve Rogers and 5 Sam Wilsons, because there's been more than one person to hold that shield.
Well, I was a big fan of the cinematic universe, Captain America, and one of my first actual figures as a adult collector was the original Toy Biz Marvel Legends Captain America. That figure wowed me with the 6-inch scale and the articulation. It was something that I used to display proudly at school on its display base, and I had that on my college dorm room shelf, which weirdly nobody commented on. I think people just chose to ignore it, but it would come back to my house with me. It would come, it would go back and forth. It was just really, really cool figure. I still have it. It's just boxed up right now, but that was one of my favorites. And that kind of started me off on this whole adult collector piece. Like, he needs friends, he needs a team, he needs enemies. And that's, I don't know, we have a question, but that's a whole wormhole starting figure right there.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
All right. Next question.
What does toy packaging have to draw you in? So you're going down the toy aisle. It's 1989 and you're looking for something and you see a team.
And I'm 5.
Okay. Well, all right. Well,
1989. Sorry.
But the point is that, you see like the older, the more classic toy packaging, sometimes would have like bubble things on it, like,
oh yeah,
Donatello now can remove his shell only in this action. It would have some sort of something. So what does the toy packaging have to have for you as a kid and as an adult collector to really draw you in to say, hey, I actually want to spend money on that? So
I don't know about necessarily like if packaging gets me to buy a figure. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I've always been more interested in the figure inside. So the packaging has kind of been secondary, but for me as a kid, the packaging I liked was the packaging that helped tell the story that I needed to know about that figure to an extent. I don't need everything about it, but Ninja Turtle packaging was really good because the character it was focusing on, the vintage stuff, would have artwork all along the packaging of that figure, of that character in action, doing something, at least up until the end of the run of that line where it just had the generic turtle head background on it. But turtle figures, and I'm looking at the ones I have on the shelf right now, they show that character in action, which visually as a younger kid, where maybe my reading comprehension wasn't the strongest, or maybe I wasn't as interested as like, new toy, I want to go read about it, I'm going to sit and read this over and over again. I did read the bio cards, but I was more interested in the visuals because that helped me know what I could do with that toy to an extent, or what I should do. So that was a big part. File cards never managed to intrigue me as a kid too much, because I'm casting this really cool character. He's coming into my toy world. He's going to be hang out with everybody else, but I'm giving him a character. I'm giving him life. The bio card only gave me so much. But a big thing about packaging is I want to see everything else that's in that release. I want to see all the other toys, everything else that's out there, so I can keep an eye out for it. I can think about it. So that's a big piece. Bright colors does help. I mean, it's something that younger kids are always going to be drawn to, are bright, bold colors and logos and designs. So that's always important.
Yep.
But packaging never 100% sold a figure to me. It was usually the figure. So Batman, the Dark Knight collection is a good example. The packaging is cool, but the figures on the inside were usually the cooler part, and the ones that were on the back of the card were also really, really cool.
Absolutely.
So yeah, long story short, that was it. The only packaging that I would say, if I were to go back and say, I want to keep all of these in the card because they fit a really coherent, very unique style, are the original run of the Lord of the Rings figures by Toy Biz. Because they had that really nice window box that was surrounded by different designs, usually the one ring. The figures were usually posed in an action pose if they could be. And that was a very, very cool style of packaging. It was also something resealable. So if you wanted to take the figure in and out, you could check it out. That was one of the, I could be wrong about this, but I think it's one of the first resealable packages that existed.
I'm not even sure. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but they were better about that. And it just was a very, very strong visual. Most other ones, I would say, are somewhat disposable.
Except for the Funko boxes, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, we'll get to that with a bottle of kerosene and a lighter.
I don't think so. That's what the water ruled toys are for. Do you open your toys or do you leave them packaged? If you keep toys packaged, do you have any specific criteria for that?
When I first started collecting as an adult, I was a straightforward opener. Then I really got deep into Toy Biz Marvel Legends. And if you know anything about Toy Biz Marvel Legends, some were notoriously almost NECA level fragile.
Right.
I had figures that would break right out of the box. So when I would get a figure I really liked, I tended to always start buying an extra, not for display, not how some people say, oh, I bought one to open, one to display. That wasn't me so much. That was, I'm opening one to pose and display and put on my shelf, and I'm buying another one as an insurance policy in case this one breaks.
Right. Yeah.
That was really the purpose. And that's how I actually started growing a really, really nice packaged Marvel Legends collection. I used to have 30 or 40, including the rare variants and a lot of the really nice figures that were in that line. And it was not because I wanted to display them in the package. It's just I wanted to keep them safe in case my Deadpool or my Thor Buster Iron Man broke. And that got me into the mode of collecting figures in the package. I've gotten rid of a lot of my package figures over time. The ones I keep right now are mostly examples of some of my favorite toys growing up, or they have some sort of significance to them, or they're a really great example of packaging from that time. So I have a Bucky O'Hare in the package. I have Ninja Turtles in the package, because I think some of these just look better in the package, or they just are kind of significant and I prefer them in there. I think a really good example is I have a X Factor Cyclops, the blue and the white outfit,
right,
where he's in this giant onesie unitard sort of thing with very little detail to it, but he had a really good light up feature. If I put that on my shelf right now, it would just get lost. But having it up on the package on the wall, again, it's not a super valuable figure, but at least it gets its own place to stand out. So that's the other reason why I keep a lot of stuff in the package. Or it's just, I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle. I want it to look unique and just sort of represent that cool aspect of, hey, I was a kid, I like packaged toys. I used to keep them on a pegboard, so they looked like they're actually at a toy store. But that started taking.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a cool little thing, and I might do it again one day if I have the space. But you can only see the figure on the front at a time. Like you only see the one figure at a time. So it was, do I want to save space and put them all on this peg, or do I want to put them on a wall and I can see them all at once? So a lot of decisions had to get made. Some got sold. I got rid of some got opened. So now I actually open up a lot of vintage figures and I save the card back. So I have a little card back collection and they just make their way onto the shelf. So there's always a whole process. If it was actually something that was scientific or legitimate or something detailed on paper, I would tell you, but it really just comes down to the feeling at the time.
Right. Absolutely. If as a kid you only were allowed to choose one toy franchise to collect from, which one would you choose and why? Meaning, no Waterworld toys for Josh.
And I'll have you know, I didn't collect Waterworld toys till I was in high school. Just throwing that out there.
True, but still.
Just throwing that out there. Because I actually didn't see the movie until almost 2 or 3 years after it was in theaters. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I would honestly say G.I. Joe. 100% G.I. Joe, without a doubt. And almost at any point in that entire line. Reason being, variety, color, unique characters. Do I want a tank that can launch a plastic glider 20 feet in the air? They got it. Do I want bases? Do I want bivouac tents? Do I want just about anything you can get in the G.I. Joe line? And it's nice and posable. There's tons of accessories. The variety is outstanding, and a lot of the features were functional. Mm-hmm. Boats could float, some of them, some sunk. Just some you would put in water and they would sink in 3 seconds.
Yes, they did.
But the vehicles rolled. They had opening and closing canopies or doors. You could fit, I have the His Tank 2, I'm looking at it. The His Tank 2 is basically the minivan of Cobra vehicles. You could fit, I think, 4 or 6 soldiers in the back of it. It had a really cool like opening mouth piece in the front. It just really, anything you could think of they had, and it was filled with so much variety that yes, if I could focus on that, I probably would have gotten a whole lot more and still appreciate it to this day.
Mm-hmm. Just think, if they painted that thing white and put a no ghost logo on it, you could fit 4 Ghostbusters in there.
And I would not have been as angry of a child. All of my discipline problems in school, just because I could only fit 2 Ghostbusters at a time in that car.
Mm-hmm. As an adult, do you prefer vintage toys or modern toys?
If you were to ask me a couple years ago, I probably would have said vintage.
Mm-hmm. And now?
Now I'm not as sure anymore because they both have the same problem, is that if you want them, you either have to pay more than I would say would be sensible, or you really have to hunt them down, or variety, somewhere in between. So a lot of the unique vintage toys that I would be after right now, for some reason, the stuff I'm really interested in is what the market is just shooting up in. Street Sharks are a great example. I think it's a very fun, very silly, very goofy line. It's very eye-striking if you see it on a shelf. But holy cats, those are super expensive. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, nobody cared. I just saw a packaged Street Shark for $400, $500.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah. Modern figures are just getting annoying because if Toy Guru is right about how things are being put out there, it's just shopping at retail is not easy. I feel like I'm not always getting my money's worth. I don't know. I'm trying not to get jaded. I'm trying not to get bitter, but without a doubt, if Kane County is a great sample, here's my answer to this question at the end of the day. I had more fun checking out vintage stuff that I could go around and say, oh, wow, I remember that. Or, oh, wow, I didn't know that existed. Or, oh, wow, that's so cool. Modern stuff, I don't really say that about as much anymore. So vintage, I think, is where my interest, my amazement, vintage is just where my attention was drawn to more, because there were booths filled with modern toys, but digging through an old bin, looking through somebody's box of just random stuff they had, I know they're not making more vintage toys, but it's just where I was more fascinated with what I could find.
Absolutely. And I mean, at this point, 10 years from now, what's currently modern will be vintage. I know technically there are actual distinguish 100 years is antique, 20 year. Yeah, I understand all of that. That's fine. I'm just saying, everybody, we always talk about vintage toys over modern toys and how the modern toys are now. Well, in 20 years, the modern toys of today will actually be vintage.
Well, if you think about it, exactly. If you think about it, what was popular 20 years ago? So 2001, Marvel Legends, Spider-Man Classics was just starting to come out.
Mm-hmm.
I think Muppets was a thing at that time. But 20 years before 2001 was 1981.
Yep.
So in 2001, were people looking at Kenner Star Wars as vintage at that time? I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
So if people were looking at Kenner Star Wars as vintage in 2001, I think we can look at early Toy Biz Marvel Legends as vintage in 2021. But I don't want to start a flame war and get attacked by people who are going to pull definitions out of the Encyclopedia Britannica. So
no, they still have those.
Yes, you can access it online, and
I thought that company went belly up.
Apparently you can access it online, and anytime anybody says anything to the contrary, you can copy and paste a link right to a page about what vintage actually means.
Oh, Lord.
Discussion is dead.
Wow. Okay, then. What is one toy you can always play with?
I feel like this could be a very loaded and dangerous question.
No. I didn't say sex toy. I said action. Okay, fine. What is one action figure?
So just so you know, my mom might be listening to this, and I wasn't going there.
Yeah. Well, I was. It's my show. It's explicit. Sorry, Mom.
Mom, I am sorry. Put a mom warning on this for me, please. And coworker warning and spouse warning if you can. Just put all the whatever warning labels you can put on there. Now, one toy that I can always play with is usually going to be some sort of a transformer. I would say I don't have a specific one, but if you give me an easy to transform transformer, not like the Michael Bay ones that were more like origami than a transformer, but some of those like Generations or the Thrilling 30 Years that it wasn't difficult to transform them. I felt smart being able to transform these Transformers. And I have I guess a bright example. I can't remember the name of the Transformer. He's a bright orange bulldozer that came out a couple of years ago and has been clearanced out at every store that has ever carried him. But it's just a very easy transformation. He's got wonderful bright orange colors. And when you have cats in 5 cat boxes, it's actually kind of fun to goof around with and be like, look, I have a transformer that serves a dual purpose of cleaning the cat box out. He does get washed every time, don't worry. But I would say Transformers, especially ones that are just a little bit more straightforward and easy to transform. I don't want the 42, 76 step Transformers like the new Unicron, which is 76 steps, if not more. Transform it.
76 steps? Really? I thought it was 176 steps.
Okay, it very well could be. And apparently you also need to be a part-time power lifter in order to actually transform it easily. So, but nobody's confirmed that to me.
Now, you said a bulldozer, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I have Wedge. And no, we're not talking about Star Wars, folks. I put into Google bright orange bulldozer Transformers toy, and the first thing for all that came back is something called Wedge. Let me look at the images here. Yes, folks, we're live podcasting. Don't you just love it? Let me see here. Yeah, it says Cybertron Landmine. There's that. Transformers Robots in Disguise Wedge. I don't know. Anyway, who knows?
Let's spend the next 20 minutes trying to figure out which one I'm talking about. Actually, I'll try to answer the next question while I'm looking it up. I will multitask, which is something I'm not very skilled at.
Yeah, me either. Even though there are always toy lines that people never purchase, are there any that you specifically and purposefully avoid?
Pops.
This not be. Hey.
Pops. Next question. Pops.
This can be toy lines, specific
Pops.
characters, etc.
Next question. Pops.
And what he
Pops.
means, folks, is Funko Pops. So in case
Pops.
anyone doesn't know, all right. Are there any toys in the past or currently that you wish you hadn't bought them? Are there any toys that you may have sold that you regret letting them go?
I'll answer the second question first. I won't go into too much detail about it. I made a deal that I thought was going to be strong at the time. I put some money in my pocket, move out some product, but I sold a blind box Palisades Pit Battle Ash figure from Army of Darkness. I couldn't. They're really rare, so they're very hard to find a value on, and I sold it for way less than I should have. And I still kick myself to this day for actually selling it. The only reason why I can make myself feel a little bit better about it is that they were so fragile that I worried about if I actually posed them or put him on my shelf. If he ever fell, he would just break anyways. That entire line is known for being extremely fragile. So it's not just the value that I lost on it, but it's just, I don't know. I'm going to keep that story to myself a little bit more, but
Okay.
I regret selling that one because I think I would have rather just have the amount that I got for it. I think I would be more happy if it was just still sitting in a box. Long story short. As far as something that I wish I never bought, that's a tough one because even if you were to look at my display, you'd be like, you don't seem to be in the least bit picky about the things you buy. I'm actually very picky. There was a box of Transformers that I bought at off of a Facebook ad, marketplace ad. I got a decent deal on it. I wish I investigated a little bit further. I bought it in a parking lot at night in the middle of the winter.
Oh, Lord, yes.
And I was hoping to use it to add some meat to my Kane County Toy Show booth. And after I had gotten it, there were a couple of decent Transformers in there, but after I did some research and I split them up and I parted them out and I tried to figure out what I could do with them, I just could not figure out how to even sell them to make the smallest amount of profit. Even if it was like a $2 profit, I still couldn't figure out how to do that. So I would regret having bought that entire box. I eventually was able to get my money back on it, but it was so frustrating because it was after Armada. Maybe it was like Transformers Cybertron. And they're really,
Right.
it was some Energon and then whatever came after Energon, Cybertron or something.
Yep.
And it's not that they were bad necessarily. It's just nobody is craving an Energon Starscream.
Oh, hell no.
No.
Hell no.
So I priced them just to get my money back on them. And I remember being so annoyed and so disappointed in that purchase because I was trying to get into that reseller thing and finding good lots. And I gambled poorly. So that'd be something I would say I regret buying. Also, I got a Pop once and I regretted it.
Which one?
I don't know. I have repressed it from my memory. I was so disappointed. It took years of therapy to finally accept the fact that I sold it to a small squirrel in the backyard.
Oh, God, stop it.
I'm sorry.
Okay, then. I refuse. So a couple of years ago, when Karen and I were still living in Illinois, it was like right at the craze of the NES and SNES classics, the new little $80-$90 small mini video game computer things that, oh, you can have all of these things in one thing. You can have Super Mario World. You can have Legend of Zelda. So all those things, it comes with 30 games. Well, I found one on Facebook Market. I will never, because of this one, it wasn't because of the actual encounter when I went to go get it. It was because apparently I didn't look close enough that it was basically just a NES Classic, but it was an emulator. So it didn't really, it's like, oh, it has over 1,000. I'm like, no, it doesn't have over 1,000 games. It shouldn't. It should only have 30 because it's all what's supposed to be on it. And literally there was Angry Birds, Super Mario Brothers Angry Birds on this thing. And I'm like, wait, what? How does that fucking work? I don't know how that fucking works. So ever since then, I have the only other thing we've done on Facebook Marketplace is we sold our old couch before we moved. And that actually led to a fairly good friendship where the people and we are still friends today. But in general, if I'm buying toys, I'm going to eBay, I'm going to Amazon, I'm going to anywhere other than Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah. And I still talk to a lot of sellers. I talk to a lot of people who run shops out here, and they still, I don't know how they find it. Granted, I'm not looking, so that's probably how I'm not finding it, more than likely. But there are still things to be found out there, but people are starting to learn that the things they have value. And they're knowing that, hey, I'm not going to just throw this up for $20 and it's $400 worth of toys.
Right.
They at least have an idea. So shows like, what was it? Toy Hunter, whatever that show was, stuff like that. Just even if you had a box full of junky toys from the late 90s, early 2000s, you think you have gold and you're going to put your kids through college. And that's
not necessarily.
Well, they think that's not going to happen, but that's what they think. And that was one of my issues sometimes going to the one estate sale I went to buy toys. They thought they knew that they had gold. They really didn't. There was some decent stuff. I mean, I got a toy box filled with a ton of different parts and stuff that turned out to have little gold nuggets in there. But no, it is getting harder and harder to find stuff that is going to be at a good price because people are knowing that they have stuff that is kind of valuable. So, all right, what's next?
How large or small is your toy collection? Do your toys take up the whole house, or are they just relegated to one room shelf or something like that?
It's definitely not a small collection. It's definitely a large collection. It would be, if this is coming out after Draper's collection, I don't know.
Oh, it is, yeah.
I don't know how he described his collection. His is a fantastic museum.
Yes, it's a whole basement. Yes, and this will be coming out after episode 100. So yeah,
and it is a meticulously set up display, and it's amazing. To see it in person, I can't even do it justice to describe it. However, mine is pretty large. I have a 3-bedroom home. We're very, very fortunate in the home that we got. We're very, very happy with it. And one of the bedrooms is a guest room. One of the bedrooms is our master bedroom. And then we have this other one that's kind of we used to call it the man cave when in our previous home. This is more, we just call it the blue room because it's a very blue room. All the walls are blue. But 2 of the walls are filled floor to ceiling with shelves and figures.
Wow.
There is a large window in the room that takes up one of the larger walls. There's not a whole lot on that wall, just in one corner. And yeah, it's a very sizable collection. When we had a box to move, it was almost embarrassing to have my friends help move it because there was so much. Granted, a lot of the boxes also had a lot of padding and packaging to make sure it stayed safe.
Right.
But it's a sizable collection. I don't know if I could throw a dollar value on it or if I were to try to count everything I have, because I mean, let's be real. Like, some people could have 15 figures and the value of those 15 figures could be more than my entire room or possibly even my house. but it's a sizable collection. It's probably, it would shock most people to see if they don't know what collections actually typically look like.
Side note, not on the list. How do you keep track of all of it?
So my mind doesn't work good. I am really good at having a mental inventory of accessories and parts and where things are. And that one of my biggest anxieties is losing accessories. So I've gotten really good at storing accessories and organizing them, especially since I moved and I completely reorganized the majority of all of my collections. So I do a really good job keeping them stored in plastic bags, in labeled boxes. And in the next couple of weeks, I'm really going to improve that system as it is. But in terms of keeping track of them, I have a weird memory. I can tell you what accessories came with Toxie, the Toxic Crusader, but I might go to the store and I'll forget 3 of the 22 things that I went to go there. Like, not even the 3 of the 22, 3 of the 4 things I went to the store for. Let's just be honest. I can go to Target and forget to buy 75% of the things I went there to buy. And I know I should use a list and I should try to memorize stuff or whatever, but it's a really weird situation. I would say just because I've gotten better at keeping it, and I call it organized, somebody from the outside would probably say I'm absolutely insane for even suggesting that I'm keeping a system of organization. But I remember one time getting ready for a toy show, I could not find a hand for an Iron Man figure. And losing that kind of stuff is one of those things that just sets me off. It's just,
that's funny.
I need to find it. I need to get it soon, especially when, as you know, in the action figure world, you could have a $50 figure if it's got all of its accessories. If it's missing one, it becomes a $20 figure.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Or a $10 figure or a $5 figure, depending on what it is. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And it could be something as simple as a instead of a fisted hand, it's just an open grip hand. I've gotten past that a little bit now where it's like, it's not a huge deal. I don't really care. But I still keep pretty good track of those things, and just by having a sense of organization. And like I said, next couple of weeks,
there you go.
I'm going to keep building on that.
How do you display your collection?
On shelves, lots of shelves. With lights on some of them.
On some of them, but not others, huh?
I used to have a stronger thematic run through the shelves. I actually had a logical transition, and I've had to forego that a little bit. In my most recent display, I could actually describe to you why I went from Power Rangers to Transformers, and why did that then flow into this section, and why I used to have a better grasp on that. But just to get things to fit, to get them to be visible, I gave up on that. I do keep an eye on size, height, color, and somewhat theming. So I like keeping pops of brighter colors throughout. I don't like all dark colors being in one section. I like having some sort of uniform height system if I can. If you were to look at it, you might not actually agree, but it's something that I am pretty meticulous about. I'm actually pretty typical to set up an entire shelf, sit down, look at it for about 10 minutes, take the entire shelf back down, and redo the whole thing.
Wow. Holy crap.
Yep.
All right. So yourself, your wife, the pets, the kids, the whatever, everybody is safe, but the house is on fire. If you could only keep one toy from your entire collection, what would it be and why?
Oof, that's a tough one. And I know this is not an uncommon question amongst collectors. I've been asked this by people who have just come to see the collection. Everything I have on my shelf, for the most part, is replaceable. That's the tough thing for me right now to realize, is that almost everything up there is replaceable. There is one thing that is legitimately not replaceable because the people making it no longer are making it, but that's the 3D printed Food Fighter playset. So that's a one-of-a-kind piece I have up there, and I also painted it myself. So I'm not saying that's the one I would grab, but everything else is pretty much replaceable over time, and not saying that I would want to rebuy my entire collection, but everything is replaceable.
Okay.
I would say the most unusual thing that I would try to save, and I have it buried somewhere, is when I was a kid, we had a Frankenstein Ninja Turtle figure that my mom tried to make for us because it had gotten broken. I think a leg or an arm got broken off of it. The head had to be swapped. So I think it's either a Raphael body with a Leonardo head or vice versa. One of the arms is missing. And I have a distinct memory of my mom doing everything she could to repair this Ninja Turtle for us. Especially for me, I was very heartbroken over it. I think because Raphael was one of mine, she was trying to repair it. And it was just kind of one of those moments where I, as a kid, recognized how above and beyond my mom was trying to go to try to fix the situation. And I'm pretty sure I still have it. I might try to dig it out after we're done, but it's missing the forearm. So from the elbow down, it's missing that. It's got a mismatching head, but that's probably the only thing that's irreplaceable because that was something that my mom tried to do to fix a bad situation. Everything else, it can, I hate to say it, but it can burn.
Okay, then. Well, that's interesting. This is a new question for us here at ToyCast. This is one you actually came up with. Here's the Toy Box Challenge. You get one 18 by 18 by 18 box. The only toys you can keep have to fit in the box. What can you pack into it?
I would probably take a good handful of my favorite G.I. Joes of all time. So pure hardcore G.I. Joe collectors are probably going to disagree, but I have some Eco Force figures I'd probably hang on to. Some of the figures that my brothers and I really enjoyed as kids would go into there. Some of the more neon and more despised figures would fall in there. My Food Fighters would probably still fit into that box. 18 by 18 would fit. The Food Fighters would probably fit in there. Toxic Crusaders, Bucky O'Hare. If I could fit the original Dragon Zord in there and the Green Ranger, that would probably fall in there. I have a fun story behind that one.
Awesome.
I would probably toss in some Ninja Turtles. Pretty much it would be like if my shelf was a buffet, that box would be my plate at Old Country Buffet, and I would just grab a little bit off of each shelf. I would keep that variety. If I could only pick one shelf in general, though, like if I could only go one shelf at a time, it would probably be the Ninja Turtle shelf because that also contains Toxic Crusaders and Bucky O'Hare. I think most people would say, yep, that's the most Josh collection there.
And at least there's no Waterworld toys. They all burnt up.
No, don't worry, because they're Waterworld. They will not burn. They're all water.
Sure. Are you a Funko fan?
Seriously?
Hey, you told me to ask the damn question.
Seriously?
I wasn't going to ask the question because I know you're more of whatever, but like I wasn't even.
Here's the thing. I started off being very, very just at ease with Funko Pops. I was okay with them. I didn't want them. There was a couple that I thought were okay, but it was sort of like me and Brussels sprouts as a kid. It was on the table. It was on my plate. I was never going to touch them. And in fact, if I could just throw them in the trash, it'd make no difference to me. But since you started picking on Waterworld...
It's Waterworld!
Again, as I mentioned in our text thread, you are making fun of me for something that you did not know existed.
Because, honestly, does that movie really need to exist anymore? Are there any actual fans of the 1997, 5, 6, anyway,
5.
1995 Waterworld with Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston? Anybody a fan of that movie?
And Whitney Houston was not in it.
I know. The Water Guard. That would have been a better movie.
However, I think we can both agree that if Whitney Houston was in it, her pop single would have been awesome.
I want to drown somebody.
Continue on. Let's hear it, sir. Continue. Hum a few more bars for us.
God, that's funny.
Again, I will say that I appreciate that Funko creates 500,000 different licenses in the same style. So if you want a nice uniform collection, you can have that. I appreciate that. I just avoid it because it's a rabbit hole and it's a wormhole or whatever you want to call it. It's something I do not want to get involved in, and it doesn't meet any of my criteria for what I like in a toy. I'm sorry.
It may not meet your criteria, but they do have the G.I. Joe license, and it might be the only time in my entire life, other than the fact when I had Mighty Mugs about a decade ago, that I might actually have G.I. Joe action figures, because I was never into G.I. Joe as a kid. I may have had a couple of them, but they were more like, oh, here's another Green Army person that isn't voiced by the late, great R. Lee Ermey kind of thing. So, yeah.
And I respect that. I think
you do realize if they do make a Charbroil, I will have to get it for you.
And if they make a Kevin Costner from Waterworld,
yeah,
I probably will get 22 of them. However, again, I love G.I. Joe, but I'm drawn to the neon ridiculousness that was the 1990, 1991, 2, 3, 4 figure lines. And if they're making, like you said, just their early, more realistic olive green, dark green, forest green G.I. Joes, I'm not as interested, which is one of the reasons why I don't care for G.I. Joe Classified anymore, because I feel that they're going to go more that route and have more of the uniform, more realistic looking than sci-fi and crazy neon colors. And that's great. If people like that, then awesome. It's just you'll have one less person to compete for. Or compete with to get those figures.
Uh-huh.
I like the neon stupidity.
Then you should really love the Funko Pop Blacklight series.
No, I won't.
Anyway, all right. What was the most money you ever spent on a toy or a toy item?
Hands down, Masters Classics, Castle Grayskull. Nothing comes close to that. I don't think anything ever will again. That was something that I got the pre-order for, saved up for, got prepared for. I don't think I've gotten anything that's even close to half what that cost. So that would be it. I would say the Mezco 112 figures, the Affleck Batman would probably be closer to that, because I was hoping he would become my iconic Batman, but you can snort and snort all you want.
I am sorry, but there ain't no way in hell Chucky from Good Will Hunting is going to become your go-to Batman.
Well, I can't believe you brought Skylar here. We're fucking all bombed and drinking.
I know, Morgan. It's a real rarity we'd be all drinking.
You know, my Uncle Marty drinks. I'm going to Bender for 6-8 months. Ever tell you what happened to him when he was driving up there and he got pulled over? I told you guys, right?
My Uncle Marty, yeah.
Let me tell you what happened to my Uncle Marty, because just because you ought to know this.
He's always telling stories over here. Every time we come here, he's got another story, but we all heard the story. Go ahead, I'll say it anyway. Go ahead.
I will go ahead. Thanks a lot. Guess I have the floor now. Yeah, my Uncle Marty's driving home, right? Bombed out of his tree, right? Just hammered out of his gourd. Just whacked. State trooper sees him and pulls him over. So my uncle's fucked, basically. We got him out of the car, trying to make them walk the line. He gets out of the car and, pukes on the guy. Stated pretty sure he's over the legal limit. So he's about to throw the cuffs on him and put him in jail. All of a sudden, 50 yards down the road, there's this huge fucking boom, right? So Stady gets real spooked and he turns around. You got shot? No, some. I've heard this story before. Some other guy's car had hit a tree. Okay, there was an accident. Anyway.
How could he hear the other car accident if he wasn't right behind
I'm gonna break your neck. Shut up. Okay, shut up.
Sorry, he told you the story once before.
So he tells my uncle, stay here. Don't move. So Stady goes running down the road to deal with the other accident. After a few minutes of just lying in his own piss and vomit, my uncle starts wondering what he's doing there. Gets up, gets in his car, and just drives home. Well, the next morning, my uncle's just passed out, and he hears this knocking at the door. So he goes downstairs, like, and pulls the door open. What? It's the state trooper that pulled him over. Stady's like, fuck do you mean, what? You know what? I pulled you over last night as what? And you fucking took off. He's like, bitch, I never seen you before in my life. I've been home all night with my kids. I don't know who the fuck you are. He's like, you know who I am. Let me get in your garage. I was like, what? He's like, you heard me. Let me get in your garage. I was like, all right, fine. Takes him around to the garage, opens the door, and there's this Stades police cruiser is in my uncle's garage. Is that fucking? He was so fucking hammered, he drove the wrong car home. And the best part about it is the fucking state trooper was so embarrassed he didn't do anything. He'd been driving around all night in my uncle's Chevelle looking for the house.
All right, Chuck, what the fuck is the point of your story?
No, he got away. That's the point.
All right,
what can I
question.
Come on,
are you
stop.
fucking, I'm trying to clarify something, probably.
You're
too
embarrassing
to ask because it doesn't make any sense.
It does make sense if you listen to the story and quit asking questions.
It was a solid figure because one of my criteria for Batman is I want him to have a cape, a soft goods cape. I also wanted him to be posable. I want him to look like he's in some sort of armor. Those are some of the criteria I had for Batman. And the one problem I have with Mezco, and this is one of the better aspects of Mezco, is that the cloth outfits just end up looking a little chunky, and he didn't fit with what I had. The light didn't hit him the same as my other figures. Like it was one of those visual things that just, the more I sat back and looked at him, didn't want him. And Mezco toys typically hold their value, so I was able to actually sell him at a very good price and still make a little money off of it. So I think I was up maybe $20 on that figure at the end of the day.
There you go. What toys are you actively collecting right now or actively searching for?
I would say I'm pretty much not looking into G.I. Joe Classified anymore. I think I'm done there. Marvel Legends, I would be shocked if anything came out in the next year that I really was after. DC is pretty much dead because McFarlane does a different scale than everything I've collected over the years. So there's not a whole lot that I'm really interested in. Wrestling, I'm really getting to the end of that. There's not a whole lot more that I want. In most wrestling figures, at least with Mattel, you get one, you kind of get them all. They're all pretty similar. They don't change much except for who the character is. Mm-hmm. So modern stuff, I'm kind of getting towards an end of with a lot of those lines that I just mentioned. Vintage stuff, there's just odds and ends I'm looking for. Like there's one little tiny Transformer I'm looking for. What was the other thing I was just keeping an eye out for? Can't remember. There's little odds and ends, but the thing is, I have to keep telling myself sometimes when I'm trying to get a little bit more discipline, dedication to what I have. If I did not get another toy for another 6 months, I would still be perfectly okay. So I can't give you a good answer on that, with the exception of this random tiny, what was it called? I think it's Euler. Really, really, really tiny, not maybe a Micromaster called Euler, I think it was.
Okay. Micromaster or World's Smallest, maybe?
Not World's Smallest. If I had my phone out, I could look at my eBay saved searches, but it doesn't. I have one. It's just he's missing his door that also transforms into his arm. So I'm just trying to replace that.
The Ninja Turtle's missing an arm. The Transformer's missing an arm. Man, you got a lot of mismatched arms in your collection, don't you?
Hey, let's just say that they're all disarmed.
Mm-hmm. What modern and/or vintage toy lines are you currently collecting?
I think I kind of answered that in the previous question.
Kind of. All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
Do you visit toy shows or conventions? Obviously, this question, folks, was kind of written out before COVID hit last year. It's another one of my other standard questions. Obviously, since COVID is still a major thing, no matter whether you're vaccinated or not. I know, obviously, we did the Kane County, the Chicago Toy Show episode for this podcast, but
yeah,
in general, up until COVID hit, were you constantly going to shows?
I would not say constantly. Toy shows, the King County Toy Show is pretty much my primary show for several years. Before that, I think starting in like 2003, 2004, I was going to Wizard World Chicago when that was actually a thing before it became basically a really awkward celebrity convention.
Right, yeah.
And I was going to that for several years, sometimes going for the whole weekend, quite literally Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was there almost open to close every single day. I did that for a couple of years. Then the ticket prices started going up and the toy dealers started going down. That was one of my only places I knew to get vintage toys or toys that I hadn't seen for a long time, with the exception of a couple of small toy shops. But when it started becoming, get your autograph signed by 4th Stormtrooper from the left in that one scene in Empire Strikes Back, or washed up wrestlers. Ooh, I got some stories about some washed up wrestlers there. When it became an autograph convention and no longer where toy dealers could come in or comic shops could come in and make some extra money on the side, I had friends who ran those booths saying it is no longer economically viable for me to continue the show after this year. I stopped going, and I don't regret that. When C2E2 started, I did C2E2 for a couple of years when it first became a thing. But I will tell you, I just was going for the toys. I didn't get autographs. I didn't care about panels. So when I started going to Kane County, I stopped going to all that stuff. Why would I drop $65 to go spend more money? And that's less money that I can use to spend on a dealer or a small business in the place. So
True.
$10 at Kane County seems a lot more of a better deal.
There you go. A couple of these questions, folks, have come from other podcasters that I've podcasted with in the past. You'll probably hear some of them in future guest appearances on ToyCast Origins. What do you think it is about our generation that causes our childhood toys to mean so much more to us than, for instance, our parents' generation?
So this is something I think with a little bit of research, we can do an entire episode about.
Mm-hmm.
There's not only generational, economic, social reasons for this, but generally in the late 70s and 80s, because of a lot of political changes, a lot of legal changes, toys became big money. It was a viable industry. I don't know what it was necessarily in the 70s, but in the 80s, that's how companies could make a ton of money. Very easily, just create a bunch of little plastic figurines. I remember there being something about either a court case or a Reagan law. Something was lifted that made it a lot easier to make action figures. But that became big business. Also, rising economic levels, people having a little bit more money, the economy of the 80s. Yeah, it was buying stuff. Commercials went up. You need to have this to be happy. Buy it. Get it. Kids were happy. It's also a time when video games were awesome, but they weren't so good that they completely took all of your imagination. Did kids play a ton of video games? Yes. But they also had toys to make up a lot more of that. There's so many different factors why. My mom had toys. She did have toys. She still has some of her original Barbies. My dad had a train set. He still had some of those. But also, Barbie is maybe an exception. But for my dad, his toys weren't tied to characters that he sort of felt drawn to, which I think is a big difference. Where you being 49, right? 41?
Yeah.
You being 41, you grew up a little bit more with Star Wars. You probably connected with Star Wars or Transformers or whatever the case may be. My dad had train sets. There wasn't a hero. There wasn't a struggle between good versus evil. He had toy soldiers,
right? But
it wasn't the same as what we had growing up. And they were just very, very different times. I think another big piece of it is just the changing culture of we need to make sure kids are as happy and entertained as we possibly can. And that means buying all the toys for them, getting all the toys for them, making sure that they felt good about themselves. There's so many different things that I could say about this. The rise of the Saturday morning cartoons, the rise of specific toy stores, all those things.
Absolutely. What is your motivation for purchasing toys? To display, to play, to fiddle, just to have them, just to sell them? What's your motivation?
We're really getting deep here. I feel like I should actually be paying you $150 an hour right now.
Yes, please do, because these questions, like the one I just asked you and this one and a couple others, actually come from another educator, my buddy Joe Reed, who also teaches students and things like that. So Joe has a very deep thinking brain. So he was really trying to go for the gusto here.
So the first reason I'm going to start with is I don't have a motivation of I want to complete this entire set. I don't do that. I think a big piece for me is similar to a lot of other people where I grew up with toys as a kid. Now that I'm adult, I never really stopped enjoying toys. I enjoy the business side of them. I enjoy the design. I enjoy the conversations. I enjoy the story that they have to tell, the connection they have to different time periods. It's the best way I could describe it is maybe a little bit more of it being my art form. I can draw. I can't draw well. I can write, but I don't write well. I can talk, but based on how often I say I don't talk well enough.
Stop saying it.
Hey, that was an example that wasn't me saying it by accident. Let's be clear on that.
Well, let's be clear on that, right?
One of my primary motivations, I would say, is that I enjoy it as a visual sort of art form. I enjoy displaying them. I enjoy there being a story behind why I have things the way I have them. And all collectors have similar motivations. It's fulfilling some sort of emptiness or something. There's a sense of completion. There's a sense of a successful hunt. Long story short, it's also chasing the dragon. There's always that saying of chasing the dragon, of you're always going after the next, for lack of a better term, the next high. Hey, I just found this figure. Ooh, I liked that feeling. I'm going to go out and try to do it again and duplicate it. And that becomes something that, as collectors, you have to get under control, because that can get a bit difficult to manage. But I also like the historical side of toys. I like that I actually have certain toys that I have now that I had as a kid, and I can remember a time or a place or some important fact about it or where it came from. There is some anthropological. No, why am I saying that wrong? I am on the struggle bus.
Anthropomorphic, is that what you're looking for?
No, anthropology, but as like an adverb.
Anthropomorphic, as far as I know, but I don't know.
No, anthropomorphic is where a non-human object has human-like features.
No.
Anthropology is the study of humans and their history and how they came together. But there is a deeper...
No, Tommy, he's busy.
No, that's my alarm to give my cat his medication. So there is a deeper piece to toys that I enjoy. There's history to it. I think toys kind of help with identifying the zeitgeist of culture at the time. Mm-hmm. Give me a toy line, a toy series, and we can probably have a deep conversation of what society was kind of like at the time. G.I. Joe is sort of the extension of Cold War politics, kind of seeping their way into children's playthings, preparing them for a fight between good versus evil, and allowing them to take pride in their military and looking at the military as superheroes, stuff like that. And then you get into the 90s extreme era and you have Batman basically doing the splits in his poses.
Yeah, it's a good thing Batman Damned wasn't around in the 90s, or else you'd have a pretty follicle Batman. Have you ever purchased a toy for a child with the ulterior motive of playing with it yourself?
So I can see what the next question is. Why don't we go ahead and ask the next question? Because I think they go together.
Have you ever purchased a vintage toy for a child because you enjoyed it as a child?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
When the Happy Meals sort of anniversary classic celebration came out, where they were selling reproductions of old Happy Meal toys.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I gave one of my nieces the Changeables hamburger from McDonald's that came out with that. And she loved it. She named it Burger Man. She played with it. I just happened to have an extra when I was traveling to see Dave and Duvall. And I gave it to her because she and her parents, my brother and my sister-in-law, live about halfway between Springfield and where I'm at now in Normal. So I usually like to stop and see them if I'm in the area. And so I gave it to her and she loved it. And she was my brother told me that my brother told me that she made a little camp for him under her dresser and really loved it and became a big piece of her toy playing. So I did go and order her several others off of eBay because I love them. I love to see that she enjoyed them. She found 2 different ways to play with it, either as play food or as a living character. And I did get them for her. So I knew that, I could play with her and those at the same time, and my other niece as well. And it was a lot of fun for me because those were really, really fun toys as a kid. And to see how they could make so much out of it, as here's a little man who's going to run around and he's going to talk and interact, or here's lunch, Uncle Josh. And I pretend to eat a robot cheeseburger.
There you go. Optimus Prime rib. There you go.
Ooh.
It feels like questions 28, 29, and 30 are almost the same thing. So 30 is, have you ever purchased a toy for a child because you thought it would be fun based on your own preferences? And I feel like the story you just told us kind of fits in with, but if you have a different one, that's fine too.
I know I have. I just can't think of it right now. It's probably several years ago.
Okay. Are you a toy customizer? Do you do any toy modifications, painting, building, dioramas, that kind of stuff?
If I do, it's going to be something pretty minor right now. I have a Judge Dredd that I have been working on customizing for several years now. I think he's buried in a box somewhere right now. It makes me sad that I tore apart that Toy Biz Judge Dredd that came out a couple years ago, because he's actually a very valuable figure right now. But I tore him apart because I wanted him to look more like the Dredd from the 2012 movie.
Right.
So he's almost done. He just needs one last paint job. And like I said, it's been a few years. I do enjoy doing it. I did make a couple of wrestling figures that were supposed to resemble my friends and I, when we did the backyard wrestling in high school, like a lot of very unusual children did at that time. But I did buy some modern wrestling figures and repaint them to sort of resemble us. And I learned how to do dry brushing and washes and all that stuff and priming them, taking them apart. So if I need to, I do. But for the most part, I try to avoid it as much as possible. I worry about destroying an expensive figure.
This is just a small side note, folks, because it's kind of current to the times. And this is completely off the wall here. But I don't know if you're a Law and Order fan or not. And that it's neither here nor there if you are or you aren't. But I had been watching a Special Victims Unit since it debuted in 1999. I had watched up until Christopher Maloney, who played Elliot Stabler, left in season 12 at the end of season 12.
Is that when he went to college?
Is that when I went to college or when he went to college?
No, is that when the character graduated and went to college? Like, was that his next big step up? And then we get Law and Order, the college years?
No.
Oh. I would love to see Law and Order, the college years.
Please, no. Don't give them any ideas. Anyway, not that they would take them because they'd have to pay you for them. So anyway, I watched up until that main character left. And I watched here and there, but I wasn't really paying attention. And then they did the whole William Lewis and Benson and that whole storyline, and I kind of paid attention then. But my point is that I'm currently going through a watch through from season 13 all the way up to current, which is they're at season 24 now. And the most recent episode I saw was season 16, episode 5 or 6. It starred a very much older version of Judge Rico. Armand DeSanti was in a Law and Order episode, and a few times when he turned his head or when I saw his face from a certain angle, I'm like, wait a minute. I went on IMDb, I'm like, fuck, it's Rico.
And if in that episode he did not weirdly say the word law, I would be severely disappointed, and he should just retire from acting.
As of this recording, I do not remember if he did because he was playing up an Italian accent, so I'm not really sure.
Which would probably have made it even better if he did. So please rewatch it. Let me know if he actually does say law, because if you watch the original Judge Dredd, it is
I am the law.
the one word it seems like nobody can say normally. It's either the volume's either way higher on it, they're really, really accentuating that law, or they have a mouthful of marbles. Blah. Blah. Yeah. Anyways, next question.
Do you think toy companies should specifically have adult collector toy lines, child toy lines, or find a way to mix both?
I think in today's day and age with the toy industry, I don't think that they can make, the big companies can make toys without having it be something for both. I don't see it being a possibility. And there's not really big toy companies. It's like Jazzwares, Hasbro, Mattel. Moose Toys has a little bit of an influence in there, but there's not a whole lot in the toy aisles anymore. We can say NECA. NECA is probably one of the few that sticks to predominantly action figures geared towards adults. Reason being, if I gave any of my NECA toys to my nieces for more than 30 seconds, they would be in pieces on the floor in no time.
Yeah, NECA is notorious for that kind of stuff.
Well, and that's a whole nother side episode and discussion in itself. So NECA does make toys for adults, and I think we see what the result is for that. Could companies be better about it? Could we make the argument of some of the Bandai import figures being more geared towards adults, like Figma or Mafex, which are probably more geared towards adults? But when you do that, it starts becoming way more expensive, or more fragile, or more limited to the features you may want in it. I think Hasbro, throw all the criticism that Hasbro deserves, because they deserve it. I think their Marvel, G.I. Joe, Star Wars 6-inch lines are the best middle ground between kids and collectors. I would say Mattel does a really good job with wrestling. There's a lot of kids who do enjoy their more adult-oriented Elite line, the more posable line. But I don't think you can actually make your way in the industry, have large volumes of sales, pull in massive profits, unless you have a mix. That's just the way of things right now, and I'm going to stick to that. And as much as what Toy Guru said about there being the 80-20 rule on toy lines, where 80% of the purchases are by kids and moms and 20% are by collectors, which I kind of believe I think that's a guideline. I don't think that's the rule. I think that's just a guideline. I think that's going to be the way it's going to be for the time being. I don't see that changing. So I'm going to say it's got to be both, because you can't have one or the other, because then you start getting some of the issues you see when it becomes one or the other.
Right. Do you have my parents got rid of my toys story?
No, I think when our toys were thrown out or they're given away, it's because they were clearly broken. My mom was actually really, really good about that. And I would love to ask her, maybe if she listens to this show, Mom, why were you always so good about storing our toys? I would be very interested in that. The closest thing I have to oh no, what's happening to my toys, was when we had a leaky pipe in our basement. It was a toilet pipe. It was a septic pipe.
Of course it was.
And it was a time when we were using those blue discs, those blue things you could put in your toilet tank that would make, or tank or bowl, that would always make the water almost look like blue Powerade all the time.
Yep.
And there was a leaky pipe, and I don't want to point the finger at my dad, but I'm pretty sure it was my dad, took a large bin of my toys, because it was the closest thing to that, and slid it underneath the leaky pipe.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Of this blue water. And I was able to rescue some, like my Bucky O'Hare. I rescued him. He was able to be cleaned, but there were so many, and I know as a fact now, thinking about it, so many good toys just got lost in the blue goo. And it's not that it was hey, we're getting rid of these. It was more toilet blue water goodbye forever. And I wasn't as heartbroken about it at the time because it was maybe in high school as I was later on when I realized how much was truly lost to that.
All right. Was there ever a moment where you were done with toys? Have you ever considered stopping being a collector or even selling your entire collection?
All the time. All the time. All the time. There was a time where I was really thinking about getting out of it. I had just gotten out of a relationship, and in trying to figure out and to process the end of this relationship, I was putting some of the blame on collecting, which collecting can cause a lot of relationship issues. I will be the first person to say that.
We'll get to that in a couple of questions, but yeah.
And it's unfortunate that, a very fun, very enriching hobby can do that, because hobbies and obsessions have a very thin barrier between them.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt that it was an issue, and my way to try to resolve some of the crisis I had in my head and in some emotional crisis I had was to purge. And so that's when that aforementioned package Marvel Legend line, I sold all of that. I had a pretty decent Transformers collection that disappeared. I sold a lot of Michael Bay Transformers I just maybe got retail for them, probably got less for them. Really just started purging a lot of stuff, and it eventually came to mind that it wasn't necessarily the collecting it that caused the end of the relationship. It was other larger issues, but I eventually found my way back into it, and it's been going pretty steady. The only reason I've considered selling it now is because I've had my fun. I have all these little figures staring at me right now, especially with how much we've talked about collecting becoming a commodity, that I have an investment. Is this now the time, as if it was a stock market? Should I start pushing some of these things out and trying to raise some extra capital? It's something I do consider every so often. And if it came down to it, if there was ever a crisis, if I ever needed the money, if there was something really big that we wanted to do, that I think that's what some of this stuff is here for. If it was a very specific or very important situation, like a down payment on a house or something, I don't know. But it's at the end of the day, like I said, if our house, God forbid, our house ever burns down, I would race in to grab our cats. I wouldn't grab my toys.
Right. No. That's, that question earlier, that's why I preface it by saying, everybody is safe. No human or pet is going to get hurt. That's why I always phrase that question that way, because it's more about if you only had one chance to save one, so that.
Yeah, no. I love that question. I absolutely love that question, because it does make you think about what is replaceable and what is not. And even if it was replaceable, would you want to?
Right.
By the way, I do recommend to everybody, get a good insurance agent, get your collections insured. I've been looking into doing that over the last year. I have a really good insurance agent who's going to work with me on it. Just do it. Get pictures, inventory, get an idea what you have, get it insured. You never know. Get it insured.
Exactly. What is something that does not have a toy that you'd love to have in toy form?
I think I mentioned this on an earlier episode, and I'm going to stick with it. I would say a play set of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Not something from the movies, but the actual ride from either Disneyland or Disney World.
Mm-hmm.
Something that has the fortress or the town or the village or the creepy haunted cave with the skeletons and the treasure in it. That's something that I would probably want to have in a toy form. I think it would make a really cool display piece. I enjoy Disney park replicas. They have the monorail train set that has all sorts of really neat play sets that are made from things at the parks. I really think those are really quite cool. So I think that would fit right in line with that. So yeah, I would say Pirates of the Caribbean ride playset.
Awesome. What is a toy that you'd love to have scaled up and functional for the real world?
So if I were to say something that I would want just for me, Like if I had it just in my everyday use in my normal life right now,
Right.
Probably, is it the Condor from Mask?
Yep.
The Camaro car that has the doors that pop open, and right there, I want that in my driveway. I want to be able to just pop into that the doors pop open, I fly to work. Let's just do it.
That's what the hover conversion DeLorean's for, you know.
Yeah. I mean, yes, that unfortunately, as I turned around, was not visible to me, but I do have that just a few shelves underneath. So for my own personal use, yes, that would be it. If it was something that I could see on a daily basis, probably Castle Grayskull.
How have your spouses, significant others, mates, partners, past or present, dealt with your collection?
This is a question that I want to answer delicately and respectfully.
Mm-hmm.
I know it has been a challenge for my wife. I know it has been a challenge, and I know it's been something that's been hard for her, over wondering how much money was going into it, where things were coming from. And I think there's always little things like that in relationships, of where people's personal passions maybe dominate a lot of their life and may be taking away from some aspect of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And she has, especially since we've moved, has been just an absolute saint and supportive individual. She supports me in the hobby. I think she actually admires a little bit that there is the ability to flip toys, to buy a toy for $20 and throw it on eBay or take it to a toy show and turn it into more money. I think that's something that is a cool aspect for her, because, hey, why not? If you're going to have a hobby, might as well be able to have it sustain itself.
Mm-hmm.
But I think she also really wants me, if this is something that I'm devoted to and passionate to have it be something that looks good. She wants to do the IKEA makeover of the display room and have good lighting and have things be visible and say, hey, when you walk into the room, this is your eyes are going to be going directly to this. Make sure that when people first walk in, because it's going to be overwhelming, make it be something that's colorful and unique and varied, that's going to be good to look at. So I think,
I don't know,
as long as it's something that's healthy, I think she's supportive of it. And I'm very grateful for that attitude. But I do acknowledge and respect that it's been a challenge for her. So I have to admit that, and that might not be the most extent that I can describe it in. That would be the most accurate, but I'll throw that out there for now.
What part of collecting do you struggle with?
Space.
That's what everybody struggles with. I mean,
well, space in terms of what I want to do and what I have.
Right.
I always miscalculate how much space I have. I think Marvel Legends is a good example of that. I really like the Marvel Cinematic Universe toys that have come out. That's probably one of the favorite things I've collected for the last couple of years, because I really enjoy those movies. I enjoy the improvements that they've made on them, that they look a lot better now. But I used to collect primarily the comic stuff, because that's really all that existed, with the exception of Ben Affleck Daredevil and Thomas Jane Punisher and the Tobey Maguire movies. There wasn't really a lot of cinematic stuff out there. But once I got my Cinematic Universe stuff up, I don't have a lot of space for what I really loved about the comics before. So I have several Marvel Legends that I can't get up on the shelf, including a lot of bad guys and villains, because I'm kind of out of space. They're on an 8-foot shelf, I think that is. And I didn't want to dedicate more than one shelf to Marvel Legends. And I'm out of space, and I still have more. So do I get rid of some of them? Because the ones I have are the ones I want to keep. So that's a big problem, is just the space piece, because I don't want it to be a very clustered, overflowing shelf either. I want things to be visible. So space is a big piece for that. I would say I also struggle with having all of these. Let's just be honest. They're things. I have all of these things on my shelf, and what are they doing?
They're sitting there.
I don't play with them. I don't really interact with them. Every couple of weeks I have to come into the room and find that 10, 20 of them have all collapsed, and I have to do a quick inventory of, all right, where's all of your parts? Did anything break? Where's this one? Oh, wait, now I just found his hat on the other side of the room. And I would also say just the expense. Like, it's not a cheap hobby, and the time put into it. I don't really go to stores as hardly as I used to anymore. I don't really go out toy hunting to the Walmarts and the Targets anymore. And it seems like the only way you are going to find stuff is by pure dumb luck and coincidental timing of when things are going on the shelf. Or you're like some people, and I'm not downing these people because they're dedicated. This is their hobby. This is what they're passionate for. But there's people who go to Walmart, Target every single morning. And I don't have a pity for them. I don't have a sympathy for them, but I don't have anger towards them. But that seems to be the two ways you actually succeed in this collection anymore. You go regularly, or you have pure dumb luck, or you pre-order.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. What is one positive and one negative memory you have with buying toys?
On the positive side, there's several. Being at toy shows with friends, finally getting that last piece to a collection, finally getting the last Biker Mice from Mars, or finally getting the last carded Toxic Crusader. And I remember getting those, feeling like I got them right before the prices beyond skyrocketed. There's a lot of stuff like that where it's I got the last one, or I think I mentioned on a previous episode, buying up some of my favorite packaged Ninja Turtles at $5 a piece at Kane County before those skyrocketed. There's a lot of stuff like that. My buddy at Times Past Collectibles being just so awesome of connecting me with some of my holy grails and just not expecting to find something that I've been hunting down for 5 years. I also had a tradition going to Disney World. I would always find a new Transformer to buy. And I still have most of them looking up there right now. But almost every single year I would go, I would end up purchasing a Transformer.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have most of them? I think there's one year I didn't get one. But almost every year I got, for whatever reason, I got a Transformer when I was there. And that was always fun because I know that Bumblebee and that, whatever his name is, came from...
Mm-hmm. That's probably Sideswipe, yeah.
Sideswipe? I don't know. He was a Michael Bay Transformer. He was like the silver Corvette or something. He had like giant wheels that he stood on, so he barely stands well anymore. But it's a lot of stuff like that. There are some toys I can tell really, really good stories about because I remember how I got them, where I got them, something about them from when I was a kid. And I think that's one of the big positives with toys is that there are some that you will always have a good story about if you're buying it with a purpose. As far as negatives with buying, having to pay money for them.
Well, I mean, like you said earlier, and this could be a whole other discussion, but like the whole exclusive game and either pre-ordering or having to show up at the store at 5 a.m. when it doesn't open till 8 a.m. and there's, a line out the door for whatever, what's Target and Walmart doing? Like the exclusive Masters figures or something or whatever.
I mean, if we're talking about a functional memory of actually buying toys and having a bad memory, that's a little bit hard. But as far as a bad memory with being a collector, yeah, is anytime I really put a lot of time and effort into finding a figure in the shelves and never did, or realizing I was there 5 minutes too late. One fun memory I should mention, because I wouldn't be doing this if I had a ton of bad memories. A fun memory I remember was, I want to say maybe 2005 or 2006. Might be 2006, when the Walmart Toy Biz Marvel Legends line came out. There was a news bulletin in the toy boards that there was this Marvel Legends line that was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be in those display boxes, those big displayers. And they showed everything that was going to be in there, Giant Man and all these really new, really awesome figures, and a lot of them I wanted. And a random assortment of it hit a Walmart in maybe Missouri or Kansas or something like that. Just really random location. And nobody really understood what happened, why it actually hit there. But somebody found them, they're posting on them. And I remember that night, and I didn't have any early morning classes in college at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, it's 2:00 in the morning, something like that. I had really weird hours when I was in college, and I hopped in the car, 2:30 in the morning. I remember sending a message to all my friends on the message board. I'm going to go check my Target right now, and I'm going to come back triumphant. And I jumped in the car and I threw in a CD, because that's how you listen to music back in 2006 in your car. And I was probably playing Eye of the Tiger or something, rolling down College Avenue in Normal, Illinois, heading up to the Walmart, get in there, and I'm feeling all the luck is behind me. I'm set up for success, and I walk into the Walmart and I go to where I think it should be, nothing. And I see the employee and I ask her, and she has no idea what I'm talking about, which is still a thing in retail, where you might go up to somebody, do you have the Marvel Legends Power and Glory Captain America from the new movie that comes with the hammer, but you can't see it? And they're like, we have toys. I don't know what you're talking about, dude. I remember going there and then coming back and typing to all my friends in the message board, because before Facebook groups and all that, and just saying, I didn't see it, didn't find it, womp womp. And I remember the excitement about it. And then a couple weeks later, I did the same thing again, just on a whim, and I found the majority of the set. And over the next couple of weeks, with the help of some friends in different parts of the state, eventually got everything. Good tip to collectors: if you have small rural towns, maybe 30, 45 minutes outside of your town, check out their Walmarts every so often. Not the ones directly off the highway, but if you can go in a little bit, get off the beaten path and find some out of the way Walmarts or Targets, you're going to be better off finding some of this stuff. I still remember that night, and that sort of characterized me as a collector, especially in college, of just, there were no boundaries for time of day for collecting for me.
Right. Yeah. If you could create any toy, what would you want to create? Now, this is either you can create your own thing, or any of the big toy companies give you the keys to the key. Like, if Hasbro gave you the keys to the kingdom to create your perfect charbroil, I almost said flame broil. This is not Burger King, although that's King Randor. But anyway, yeah, what toy would you want to create?
Is it just one toy, or can I make a toy line?
It's one toy, but I guess you could make a toy line. I don't know.
If I were to choose just one toy that I could make, I mean, if I had an ultimate one, I wouldn't even know what to tell you. I probably would want a very iconic Superman or Batman. Probably a Batman. Just give me a very posable Batman with interchangeable parts, tons of accessories, a cloth goods cape. Just give me the perfect Batman, so I don't need to buy anymore. So he can just be as iconic as possible. He doesn't have to look like any particular version of Batman. It just has to be recognizable as an iconic Batman. And just make it perfect. It doesn't have to be a Hush Batman or a Justice League Batman or a Keaton Batman. I just want just an iconic version of Batman. If I could make a toy line, though, and Super 7 is kind of doing this a little bit, I would actually want a fan-voted toy line dedicated to just favorite figures through multiple lines. So one series could be Toxie from Toxic Crusaders and Lone Star, or Brave Star, rather, Lone Star is Spaceballs. Brave Star. Have Prince Lightstar from Skeleton Warriors. Have a Food Fighter. Have a Ronin Warrior. And the series is basically just those individual, somewhat obscure, iconic toys, and put them in almost a Marvel Legends style or a Super 7, super articulated style.
Right.
That and Super 7 started doing that with Toxie, the Toxic Crusader, recently. And I think people want to see that a little bit more, because those are the toy lines that people are going for. They bought all the Ninja Turtles. They bought all the He-Man. They've bought all the Thundercats. They want the Street Sharks. They want the Toxies. They want the Bucky O'Hares. They want the lateral toy lines that are the next step after you've completed everything else. Give me a superposable Captain America and a Don Cheadle one too, as a variant.
There you go. All right. What is the one piece of advice you would give the toy collecting fandom?
Chill the bleep out. Just take a chill pill. People are getting angry and fighting and getting bitter and negative, and being annoyed with something, being upset with it to a healthy extent is perfectly natural. I do get annoyed with certain aspects of the industry, whether it's how much toys cost or how hard they are to find. And a little bit of constructive criticism is great, but if you are just nasty and negative and bitter all the time, find a professional to help you out, to talk to. It's I hate to end that on kind of a negative note, so I'm going to give some positive advice. Organize. Keep everything organized, keep everything labeled, and don't let the hobby cross that line into becoming an obsession. Don't let it take away from everyday, ordinary, daily activities that you should be doing in your life. If you're not paying your bills because you're putting money into toys, something's wrong. If you're not going to work because you're hunting toys, like if you miss work, you're late to work or something, you might want to avoid doing stuff like that. Don't let a hobby like this take over your life. That's not a positive piece of advice either. Let's go for a third.
It's a good thing we don't end on that question anymore, apparently, because
okay.
Yikes, dude. Because I added my own question about that follow-up question I asked you earlier. I mean, this episode's over 2 hours at this point, so I don't remember what it was. So we now have 42 questions because the answer to everything is 42. What is a piece of advice you'd give to kids who enjoy toys?
Don't let anybody, even the toy companies themselves, tell you how to play with toys. If you pick up any figure, and whether it's designed to be a good guy or a bad guy, if you want it to be whatever you want, that's what it is. And enjoy that time in your life of just unstructured, no boundaries, go nuts, play. I think it's so important for kids in their creativity and their imaginations to have unstructured play. Go for it. Make a character, make a bad guy, make a story.
Absolutely.
Make a universe. That's what I think one of the best aspects of toys is. The other thing is, keep your stuff organized. I'm going to say that again. If I could go back and tell my childhood self one thing, plastic baggies and little Tupperware containers are your best friend. If you take it out, put it back in, and store it wisely, because when you're 37 and you're trying to find the helmet to the Planeteer motorcycle and you can't find it, you're going to wish you bagged it properly when you were younger.
This is why I'm so glad Funko doesn't need bags.
Funko might as well just be a picture on the wall.
Stop it. Okay. Interesting that you say that. For Karen's last year's birthday, the year before, I don't know, recently, either Karen's birthday or Christmas or something, I pre-ordered a Funko Pop that I knew that she would enjoy from my buddy Wes Howard over at poppinofftoys.com. It wasn't going to come in time for either her birthday or Christmas, so I made her a card. Here's a picture of Grumpy Cat. Grumpy Cat Funko Pop will be showing up in the mail at some point in the future. Happy birthday, Merry Christmas, Mazel Tov, whatever. So, Funkos can be real things in real life, and they can also be pictures. We're going to take a quick break. You're going to hear a couple ads. I'm going to come back and close the show out after this.
Soundwave, jam that transmission!
Rumble Frenzy, Ravage, Rat-Bat, Eject, Operation Interference.
No, there will be no Operation Interference. I am TFG1 Mike, and you should be listening to my very first podcast, the TFG1 Podcast. 24 episodes covering the entire U.S. run of the 1984 Transformers cartoon. I also have a few supplemental episodes and an interview with Stan Bush. I bring in guest hosts who will be full-time co-hosts in Steve Megatron and fan of the show now co-host Pecan Court Michael. So check out the TFG1 Podcast. You can find it on iTunes and the web at www.geekcastradio.com. Transform and roll out.
By the power of Grayskull, I command the jaw bridge. Open!
The Powers of Grayskull series will cover every episode of all 4 Masters of the Universe cartoons. Join Optimus Solo and myself, TFG and Mike, as we tell tales of Eternia, discover the myths of Etheria, become masters in space, and finally Masters of Grayskull. We'll have a commentary on the Secret of the Sword film and a few other special episodes. You can find this 125 episode long podcast in iTunes and on the web at geekcastradio.com. By the power and honor of Grayskull, we all have the power.
Hurry, Skeletor, hurry! I am hurrying, I'm hurrying!
Decian, the superhero webcomic. Decian's got superhero antics and sexy girls. For action, comedy, mayhem, and more, read it now at Decian.com. DASIEN.com.
Because the world needs another movie podcast.
The GeekCast Radio Network presents for your listening pleasure the Cinema Geek.
Hosted by Amanda, Kevin, Matt, and Dan.
Each week we dive headfirst in the landscape of movies as we discuss movie news,
play movie games,
go in-depth on reviews,
and even have a top 10 countdown or two.
Also, don't miss our director retrospective series, where we review noted directors' movies film by film.
Bottom line is, if you love movies and love podcasts, you need to experience the Cinema Geeks.
You can find us on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, or GeekCastRadio.com.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk...
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing.
Car. Download the show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
Do you like retro cartoons? Then Saturday Morning Rewind is the podcast for you. Join them each month as they talk about classic cartoons and interview legendary voice actors like Jim Cummings.
I am the terror that flaps in the night.
Corey Burton.
Sometimes toys can be so tiny.
Rob Paulson.
Sure, Dwayne, but how are we going to find chaps our size?
Nancy Cartwright and many more.
Eat my shorts.
So grab a bowl of Lucky Charms.
They're magically delicious.
Put on your hammer pants. Go to SaturdayMorningRewind.com. And be prepared to feel like a kid again. Once again, that's SaturdayMorningRewind.com. Saturday Morning Rewind was voted Best Podcast Ever by its host, Tim Nidell. So it's gotta be good.
Holy rusted metal, Batman! Huh?
Thank you for joining us here on ToyCast. If you'd like to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show, there are several ways to do so. Visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on this and all of our other content. Send us email to feedback@geekcastradio.com. Put ToyCast Origins in the subject line. You can also put ToyCast Origins guest request in the subject line as well. Here are all the ways you can listen to us nowadays. Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, and of course the home where our files exist, Spreaker, as well as any other podcasting client you use. However, I prefer you use one of these. Leave the show's feedback in iTunes. Yes, iTunes is still a thing for Windows PCs. Please give us a review on the podcast. Follow us on Twitter. @GeekCast Radio is the network Twitter. You can also follow @TFToycast for the show. I am @TFG1Mike. What is your Twitter, sir?
You know, you've asked me this every time. I actually don't know my Twitter account off the top of my head. You keep tagging me in it, and I don't remember what it is.
Josh's Twitter is @FloorBurger553.
Oh, it is?
Become a fan of... Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, that's how I can log in from now on. Yes, it is @FloorBurger553.
Anyway.
Feel free to check out my random attempts to be funny or thoughtful or sassy to politicians.
There you go. Become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/Geekcast Radio Network. You can also search out TF ToyCast over there on Facebook. For now, I am TFG1 Michael with
The FloorBurger.
Join us next time when we will be talking toys here on ToyCast.